Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Solo Inter podcast. This episode will be about a preview for the Fiorentina match, which Inter play tomorrow. And for this special episode, I'm joined by none other than a returning guest in the form of Kaustubh. Hey Kaustubh, how are you, man?
I'm good, bro. Feels good to be called a returning guest, a bit like that
Yeah,
WWE and that wrestling thing. But yeah,
yeah.
good to be here again.
No, you're just to mention, you're also the first guest on our podcast this season. So, glad to have you as always. And guys, just to put it out there, Costa, is the editor in chief at Get Italian Football News and also contributes for Footballitalia. They do an excellent job in covering culture. Do follow them and do follow Costa on Twitter. I'll leave all the links below. So, Costa, without any further ado, I'll get right into things. Fiorentina versus Inter. This game has had quite the remarkable
Yeah,
score lines over the past few seasons. Last season 4-3 at the Giuseppe Meazza, and we won pretty much all the three games we played, including the Coppa Italia. But before that, it's always been like sort of a high scoring game,
yeah,
3-3. It's always been like sort of an end to end game. And yeah, I'm expecting a similar one tomorrow, considering that I mean Fiorentina are in some really good form, and of course Inter have great players too. So, Kaustubh, just to ask you right away, I keep seeing this thing on any social media platform, that once Lukaku left, once Hakimi left, Inter are sort of weaker. I mean, yes, I do understand that sort of things, but then Inter, of course, went on to sign Joaquin Correa, Denzel Dumfries, who's adapting and whatnot. And they, you could say, added more depth than last season, at least in terms of having an extra striker or attacking option. So, what do you think, Kaustubh? Like, briefly, just give me your thoughts. Do you think Inter have really weakened that much, or do you think they're still the best squad, or at least top two or top three? What's your take?
yeah. I think they are easily the top two or top three, but
Hmm.
their emphasis has sort of changed into a team which is now less focused on individuals, more
Hmm.
focused on a system as a whole,
Hmm.
where especially when the season started in that Genoa game,
Hmm.
there itself we could see that Inzaghi has essentially taken on what Conte implemented, even though Inzaghi's system at Lazio wasn't as,
Hmm.
I mean, the football they played was good, but it was more transition based than we are seeing at Inter now.
Yeah.
It was more about breaking those midfield lines, breaking from midfield with the transition. But you see that Bastoni and Skriniar almost playing as fullbacks, sometimes going higher up the pitch, and Rosso is dropping as a
Hmm.
centre back that we
Hmm.
constantly saw under Conte, all that stuff. So it's pretty much quite the same, but it's just about refinement of the club as a tactical identity now. So I think since Inter have lost key players, they're now just more into having, let's say, lesser known superstars. I mean, they are superstars in a way, but they're now more into becoming that tactical unit which can maybe help them solidify themselves in Europe more than the league, because we've seen that under Conte Inter could never really make a mark in the Champions League. So I think that's what they're looking at, becoming a much more complete team than they were. Not essentially better though.
I think you put it out very well there. A more complete team, but better or not
Yeah,
remains to be seen, because losing a player like Lukaku is not easy to deal with. Like you see now what he's doing at Chelsea too. He's playing so well and essential for Thomas Tuchel. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with your description of Inter. What happens, like how Dumfries gels in, how Joaquin Correa gels in after he returns from his injury. That is remains to be seen. But I do agree it's much more of a complete squad. Last season Inter always lacked that wise Lukaku they wanted,
yeah,
never got one. We had Andrea Pinamonti, and I mean, I don't want to really talk about it, disaster. I mean, I don't blame him. He's a limited player, but you get what I mean. So that was that. I just wanted to get your brief take on Inter right there. Thanks for sharing that, Kostub. So coming, since I know you're a Man United fan, but your favorite team in Serie A is Fiorentina. And of course, you have been following them for quite some time. So I want to get right into Fiorentina. You, personally, I believe this is the season where they should target some sort of European competition. I even at least believe the Europa League, a prominent place in the Europa League, if not the Conference League, because they've hired the right coach, in my opinion, Vincenzo Italiano. did a fantastic job at Spezia, finished 15th, if I'm not mistaken, last season. And yeah, he got them playing such fantastic football last season. Ricci, you had Agudelo having that cameo role last season. Mbala Enzola, fantastic whenever he was there. So, Kostov, tell me what's your take on first Fiorentina's mercato? Initially Gattuso was the coach. That whole mess happened. Mendes asked for certain demands, then Gattuso was sacked. But then you got Italiano, and I feel Fiorentina have had one of the best mercatos in the Serie A. So just give me your take on Italiano just arriving in Florence and the mercato in general, ins and outs.
When Italiano was appointed after Gattuso, I sort of had this feeling that even if Fiorentina don't really sign massive players, which of course they won't because they're not Inter, Juventus, or Milan, even if they don't sign too many players and they still manage to keep Milenkovic and Vlahovic, I think they'll be one of the better teams in the transfer market, because you look at the way Milenkovic has always given shades of being a player. Like, you can see that he's very, very good on the ball. He can play that dual role, which Tomiyasu essentially played for Bologna. It's quite a valid comparison in hindsight now, I think. Like playing as a right-sided centre back, in possession, out of possession, and in possession, almost playing as a right back. You need that sort of dynamism because Italiano is a manager who wants wide overloads, and a player like Milenkovic really offers that. And Vlahovic, we know he just needs those chances to convert them into goals. And with Spezia, we saw that they essentially overperformed under Italiano. I mean, it was an overperformance on expected goals, which isn't always sustainable. But when you've got someone like Vlahovic there, who's actually been doing very well in that regard over the last 2 seasons, even when he first scored against Cagliari 2 seasons ago, he's been essentially overperforming since then. Scored against Inter, Napoli, Juve, and all those big goals that he scored, which weren't always you weren't really expecting him to score from those angles, but he still did. And it shows that he's the sort of player who can really thrive under Italiano. And I think purely by that, I was really happy with the transfer market. And then Odriozola came in, who's actually been pretty good since he came in, since he started playing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've been pretty happy with how things have been.
Yeah, and the additions, like as you said, Odriozola. First, when Fiorentina lost Paul Lirola, I was a tad bit worried because back over at Marseille, he was doing pretty decent, and right now also this season he's had a good start. So I was like, yes, okay, fine, these guys are letting Lirola go, but who do they bring in? Because initially Zappacosta was linked, and I was like, nah, it's not a convincing name, per se. And you see, even at Atlanta, I mean, it's early days, but he sort of had a slow start. But yeah, I mean, Odriozola, I know, of course, he struggled at Madrid, but I think this is the right place to come and rediscover his form. And that backline, the fact that you mentioned Fiorentina could retain Milenkovic after letting Pezzella go, that was key because West Ham were all over that. I thought, he was gone. And then the most important thing for me, the fact that Comiso managed to keep Vlahovic. Atletico Madrid, Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester City, all three, battling for his signature in the last week or so. And I think he somewhat wanted to move, but then, of course, Fiorentina, I think, did an excellent job at keeping him, and very important because I don't think you guys would have probably found a, good enough replacement in that sort of time. So I think, as you said, Kostov, I think Fiorentina, for me, definitely top three in terms of, having the best mercato in the Serie A. What I also liked is that you guys got rid of like players like Ceccherini. I remember last time you had come on for a Hellas Verona preview. You pointed that out that he's just not good. And yeah, I mean, I can't disagree there. And, getting rid of Ceccherini, getting Nastasic back, made a lot of sense. I think Fiorentina have got something going there, and the mercato, I couldn't agree more with you, was fantastic in my opinion. And just to keep things to Italiano right now, because I think both of us have been full of praise for him for quite now quite into this video. How would you personally describe his tactical approaches? I know you mentioned a few things as like wide overloads, and I agree. But don't you think at times his defensive pairs like centre backs tend to be over aggressive in engaging in 1v1 duels? What's your take on his overall tactical approach from Spezia and what you have seen at Fiorentina so far?
I think that the thing that you pointed out, it became very clear in the first game itself, in the Roma game,
Yeah,
where we were essentially playing a line close to the halfway
yeah,
line,
mm,
which is very unusual for Fiorentina, who
yeah,
have never really had a identity like that
mm,
in about many years now. So when you play a higher defensive line, I mean, if the team is well coached and they've been playing in that system for some time, it's generally about the back line as a whole and not as a player as an individual. But it's a bit of a conundrum because
mm,
when you defend in a deeper line, you sometimes, not sometimes, you pretty much always depend on the individual traits of the players
mm,
because you're not holding a higher line and it's
agree.
not a complex tactical situation.
Mm,
But when you're holding a higher line, it's about the machine and you're just a part of this whole machine which is functioning to win a football game.
yeah,
So I think it's something which will improve over time.
yeah,
And these are players who have not played that higher defensive line for a while because
agree.
from a Premier League perspective,
Mm,
you had Shane Duffy
yeah,
at Brighton who
mm,
played at Brighton in a very high defensive line, in a deeper defensive line. Sorry.
mm,
Then he moved to Celtic on loan,
mm,
and then he got absolutely essentially destroyed in the Premiership
mm,
because Celtic are meant to play a very high line, win every
yeah,
single game,
mm,
and dominate possession. So I think
mm,
it's a bit about that, and over time these things improve. And if they don't improve, you essentially need new players
yeah.
to make sure that they fit your profile with the recovery pace, with the concentration. That's probably why Ceccherini
Mm.
isn't at the club anymore. So I think it will probably come with time this time.
Yeah, and I think you pointed that right out because because there's one common player amongst Fiorentina and Inter, that is of course Cristiano Beraghi, your captain of course now, and he was at Inter for one season. And while I personally liked one aspect of his game, that was his set piece delivery and crosses, fantastic, always on point. But he would all more often than not get turned in 1v1 duels, is something I
Mm.
noticed, and especially higher up the line, he would get beat very often. And you pointed out that correctly because you guys have Igor also as backup again, and not the most ideal. And I think Lucas Martinez, Corta, and Odriozola still have to work on those side of things. So yeah, I think that in terms of Fiorentina adopting this new approach, and I think you could see that that's why you have I think conceded in every game so far. I mean, yeah, I mean Atalanta, you can't really blame yourself for conceding because it's Atalanta after all. And although all three goals in that game were penalties, yeah, but still, I mean, I think something better could have happened versus Genoa when I watched that game. It could have been a clean sheet of sorts, but I mean, Genoa didn't play badly, but I feel it could have ended as a clean sheet for the Viola. But yeah, I think Fiorentina going into the season have to I mean, they can, in my opinion, at least be very optimistic. I
Yeah,
mean, with when you look at Juventus's form right now, I mean, I'm not saying that they'll finish about Juventus or something, but I, even if it's early days, I mean, being Italiano right now, being Comiso, being any player in there, I mean, I'll be over the moon, especially Torreira.
yeah,
I think that was so much needed for Italiano style of play, and even Pulgar. I think Pulgar has been so good so far since the season began. That assist for Milenkovic versus Roma, that ball, of course, that was fantastic. And I think, yeah, this really works in Italiano's highline. So just sticking to Fiorentina, of course, to further for you, I want to get your perspective. If I ask you, like, who are your, let's say, top five players in the squad for you, top five key players who you for the entire season, in your opinion, who you think can make a difference tomorrow as well? Who would you pick? Of
I think I should probably exclude Vlahovic in this one because
yeah, of
we know he's
course. Yeah.
probably going to be the most important one. But I
Mm,
think Pulga, I think, is going to be important because,
mm,
and apart from Pulga, I think Bonaventura has actually had a very good
yeah.
start to the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And apart from scoring the goal in the previous game, he's pretty much something that Fiorentina have lacked in
Mm.
midfield, because he offers something other midfielders just can't, because you've got Amrabat on the bench,
Mm.
you've got Benassi on the bench. They aren't really
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
midfield players who can be that link between
Yeah.
midfield and attack. I think
Yeah.
Benassi is a much better shooter,
Yeah.
but he's not the sort of player who conducts play, who plays
Yeah.
those passes into the final third.
Yeah.
So I think,
Would you just to catch you on your points, Costa, but before you continue, would you say Bonaventura is more of a direct runner than Amrabat and Benassi are, and that's what makes the difference for
yeah,
Fiorentina?
probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the running that Bonaventura offers is much
Yeah.
more different to what, I
Yeah.
mean, peak Amrabat offered.
Yeah.
By peak Amrabat, I mean that Verona season where he
Verona
was
season.
probably
Yeah.
the best, probably amongst the top three midfielders in the
Yeah.
league.
Agree.
His ball carrying was in deeper midfield, basically, was not
Mm.
in the final third or in the advanced midfield. So
Mm.
there's a bit of a difference, which makes me think that maybe they both can't play in the same team,
Mm.
because Pulga drops in as a centre back, plays
Mm.
those passes, links up play.
Mm.
Torreira can do pretty much everything apart
Yeah.
from playing in attacking midfield and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think Bonaventura is probably the most important player right now,
Wow. Yeah.
in terms of what he offers,
Mm.
in terms of his uniqueness, his style of play and stuff.
Mm.
Apart from that, I think Pulga
Mm.
second most important, because if you're playing in that possession-based system,
Mm.
you need your um, defensive midfielder or the anchorman or the regista in
Mm.
technical terms to
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
drop in to the back line, conduct
Mm.
play, switch play, and all of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm.
Torreira is still pretty good,
Yeah.
and he was pretty good under Giampaolo at Sampdoria doing
Mm.
a similar sort
Mm.
of role, but
Yeah.
I don't think his role was similar to what Pulga plays. He never
Mm.
really dropped into the back line,
Mm.
created a back three. He was much more in your face in the midfield. So I
Mm.
think Pulga at this point is a much more suited player for that system, even though Torreira has his own advantages. And
Yeah.
I've always been quite a big fan of what he presents.
Yeah.
And I think
Was.
Biragi, I think whenever I say Biragi, it gets a bit controversial because
Yeah.
he's not athletic. He's, as
Yeah.
you said, people can go past him on 1v1s.
Yeah.
He
That's
can
where
be
that's
easy
where
to go
that's where
past.
you could look forward to Dumfries versus Biragi tomorrow, because Dumfries
Yeah,
definitely is
yeah.
athletic and will take it to you. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Because if he gets those crosses in and someone's
Mm.
at the end of those crosses,
Mm. Mm.
he's pretty much a spammer
Yeah.
in a way. He
Yeah.
spams those crosses, even if he gets the ball at near the
Yeah.
halfway line. He just look
Ask
into the box and just
Yeah,
cross it in.
ask me about it, man. Ask me about it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I remember that season where Biragi
Mm.
was at Inter.
Yeah.
I remember looking at the data and stuff where
Mm.
if you looked at the fullbacks for
Mm.
that season,
Mm.
Biragi was actually the most creative fullback.
Mm.
That's probably because he's a spammer and all
Spammer.
of that
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
he's still one of Fiorentina's most creative players in a way. And then we've got Odriozola
Mm.
doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And he's actually much more athletic than Biragi,
Yeah.
which is a bonus in a way.
Mm.
And if Milinkovic plays, I think he's got to be there,
Definitely.
because he's a aerial beast.
Yeah.
If, as you said, the goals that Biragi can supply with those crosses
Mm.
and the set
Okay.
pieces,
Yeah.
you never know when Milinkovic can head those in, because there was a period in European football for about, I think, 2 or 3 seasons where Milinkovic was the highest scoring centre back
Yeah. Yeah.
of headers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being very specific, but
Yeah. No.
that's
No.
how you can praise
I,
a
rec-
player, select
I,
a
rec-
statistic.
I recall that. I recall that very well, because I think that's when he started getting a lot of traction as well. And then
Yeah,
when I remember when rumors of Conte wanting to get rid of Skriniar and all that came
yeah,
in, our prime target was Milenkovic for a reason. I mean, I'm not going to say they're exactly identical, but I can see certain similarities in them. And yeah, I mean Milenkovic, and I think even if Nico Gonzalez, if he can play tomorrow, because
yeah,
there are
sure.
doubts over his fitness, just quickly, I want to ask you, Kaustubh, like, what's your take on Nico Gonzalez? Because I think I first when the rumors came in, and then when I saw Paratici wanted him at Spurs as well, I think Fiorentina to beat Spurs to Nico Gonzalez, that
Yeah.
is tremendous. Given the resources, I mean, that's obvious. And the fact that, I mean, I don't personally rate Paratici that much. I think he was carried by Beppe Marotta at Juventus. I mean, some may disagree, but even given the resources he had and given the resources Fiorentina have, you obviously know the financial struggles Fiorentina have had over the years, and even now to get Nico Gonzalez from Spurs and consider his form so far. What's your take on it? What's your take on his time at Fiorentina so far?
Yeah, I've been quite impressed.
Hmm.
Well, I've always had this one. It's not a criticism in a way because it's not basically not his fault. Because
Hmm.
even when he was at Stuttgart, he had
Hmm.
these spells where
Hmm.
he was really, really good,
Hmm.
but all of a sudden he had those big injuries
Yeah,
where
big
he was out
injuries.
for two
Yeah,
or 3 months and
yeah.
he's gone out. And when he was hooked at halftime for Saponara in the previous game,
Hmm.
you sort of feared that
Yeah.
maybe this is the same thing happening once again that
Agree. Yeah.
constantly happened at Stuttgart. So on his day, he's the sort of player who can easily play for a top seven club in Serie A. And
Yeah.
and I'm just pretending the fact that Fiorentina are not a top seven club currently, which they arguably are maybe. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think especially considering that Spurs were losing a player of Eric Lamera's ilk,
Hmm.
and they got Brian Heelan, who again is
Yeah.
has been nominated for that
Yeah.
under 21's Golden Boot, whatever you call that,
Yeah.
that
Tutto
whole
Sport.
list.
Yeah. Thanks to Tutto Sport. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
yeah.
thanks, the great tutor sport. So it just shows that Fiorentina have got a player on their hands in a way.
Hmm. Yeah. I,
Since Spurs got Brian Hill, a
yeah.
player of Brian Hill's ilk, for Nico
Yeah.
Gonzalez,
Yeah.
he's a he's going to be a quite an important player.
Definitely. And if you ask me, like, before the season began, that Fiorentina would get, Odriozola, Nico Gonzalez, retain Milenkovic, Lahovic, still get Torreira on loan, I'd I'd call you crazy. I'd be like, Comiso all this while hasn't exactly lived to his promises, and then you're telling me in one window he will. And
Yeah,
kudos to him. I mean, he made some harsh comments on Inter recently. I don't want to get into it, but I'll give credit where it's due, of course, in terms of the mercato. He did a good job. And moving on, I just since I just wanted to touch upon Italiano's conference today. I was just reading it on Fiorentina's Twitter handle. He said, and since you pointed this guy out, which is who is Saponara, because Saponara is this, how do I
mystery.
describe Mystic. Thank you. Like, he's just a decent player, but he just turns up whenever he wants to, like whenever you need him. Like, Italiano said this, he did very well versus Genoa, and yeah, he just explodes out of nowhere. He just sort of reminds me of Caprari in a way. I don't know if I'm like,
Yeah.
not entirely, but you go those players, as you said, mystery, just something out of nowhere. So what do you think? Do you think keeping Saponara as a backup will be important going into the entire season? And he might even start tomorrow. So yeah, I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on him too.
Yeah, I think as you just pointed out, I mean, Saponara is just a enigma in a way, where if he wants, he can probably score important goals, but half the times he's probably just not fast that he should maybe turn up and score those
Yeah.
goals. But when he does, as we saw in the previous game, he comes up with those important goals where
Hmm.
Fiorentina were creating stuff, they were creating chances, the possession was there,
Hmm.
things were going well, and
Hmm.
a player of Nico Gonzalez's ilk came off and he scored that important goal. I mean,
Hmm.
Saponara scored an important goal.
Hmm.
And Fiorentina will have games like these where you see them basically tottering on the edge of either losing
Hmm.
or winning
Hmm.
games because they play a high risk,
Hmm.
high reward brand of football, a bit like Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds and
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
other clubs he's been at. And you look at the Atlanta game that we had, it was probably one of the funniest games I've
Yeah.
seen of this
Yeah.
of the European football season, where You had penalties, so many chances they couldn't even
Mm,
put those chances away. So I expect Fiorentina to have games like
mm,
those the Atlanta one
mm,
quite a few times in the season. And if you've got a player like of Saponara's ability, I mean, I'm saying
mm.
ability, but
In terms of
his
usefulness, I guess.
reputation
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he
Reputation. Yeah.
just made a reputation where he can pull goals off when others maybe aren't. I
Mm,
think he's just a handy option on the
mm,
bench because
mm,
those 6 points, 9 points, or 12 points that he can get
mm,
will be very important for a potential European
mm.
qualification.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on that. And I was just to follow up on Italiano's conference. He even said that he didn't expect Fiorentina to be at this stage. He's glad that they are. And I mean, technically, keeping Camiso aside, I have my things against Camiso, not only because of yesterday's comments, but in general. But I think I'm personally happy to see Fiorentina here because I think it's been a long time coming. I've been expecting this a season ago, a season before that, and even before that. And I'm genuine, and I think you'll agree that I'm not exaggerating because
Yeah,
they could have been there before, especially when Camiso took over. So, just to cap off things, I think in terms of team news, of course, Nico Gonzalez is a doubt. Uh, Gaetano Castrovilli is going to be unavailable. I think he was in hospital care, so hopefully he recovers soon. In terms for us, Vidal has a calf strain, so he can't make it. He'll probably even miss up
yeah.
until Shakhtar versus them in the Champions League. Joaquin Correa, he took a big blow to his pelvis after De Silvestri need him. I mean, I personally felt that should have been a second yellow, but it is what it is. And he's not traveling as a precaution because we also face Atalanta after you guys. And of course, that's a tough run. So he's not going to be there. Of course, Mr. Stefano Sensi, not going to be there as well. I mean, I don't want to discuss him because, of course, it's become a huge thing now amongst Interisti in general. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the absentees for us. And just before we move on, Costo, into the final stages of this episode, since I brought up Castrovilli, just your brief take. Do you think there has been sort of a dip in his game? Like, because and I've just posed this as a question because it's something that I noticed. Like, you remember the time when he burst onto the scene and there was so much talk going on. Do you think it's been injuries, or what do you think has been that off late he's not been the most standout player in Fiorentina? Because for I think a season almost he was, and then he's suddenly not the most talked about, or the not even probably whenever he has played, not been the best on the pitch either. What's your take on Castrovilli? Like, I know he's injured, but what do you make of this?
I think the weird thing with Castrovilli is the fact that probably his best performances and his best spell as a Fiorentina player probably came with Frank Ribery.
Yeah.
When Ribery was playing regularly under Montella, when in
Mm,
Montella's second spell, when Fiorentina were on that weird winless spell, and they were then on that
mm,
unbeaten run.
mm,
I mean, whatever that was, that weird spell. I mean, Ribery was a constant playing with Castrovilli. They used to exchange those one-touch passes. Since Ribery got injured in that 1920 season,
yeah.
Castrovilli, I think, from there on, he
Mm,
sort of became that inconsistent player where he
mm,
had to hold on to the ball more.
yeah.
Where, I mean, I don't think that's his job. He
Yeah.
should be
Agree.
a bit more like, let's say, Lorenzo Pellegrini,
Pellegrini.
where he's playing those quicker passes, not showing off his dance skills on the pitch every single time. I
Yeah.
mean, technically he's quite brilliant. We know that,
Yeah.
but you regularly see that his approach to game has not really
Mm,
evolved from what it was.
mm,
Whereas someone like Pellegrini, he's become versatile. He's become better. He knows when to release the pass, when to hold on to it.
mm,
Whereas Castrovilli he's basically plodded on in a way where
yeah.
he's basically stayed where he was. I mean, he
Yeah.
went to Serie A B in the loan spell
Yeah.
in the 18-19 season, and then
Mm,
came on, and everyone expected him to tear culture apart,
yeah.
which I don't think he
I
can do without
yeah.
a player of not just like Frank Ribery. players who help him play
Yeah,
um,
I
play those
think
passes quickly, exchange
I
passes, and
I
then
think
move quickly
yeah,
between the lines.
yeah, I think that's what I was going to add. As you said, moving quickly between the lines, and I
Yeah,
think that's where Fiorentina would need like a focal point per se. Like I know
yeah,
Vlahovic in the box and his movement is good, but I think something he needs to improve in is his link up play and also hold up to an
yeah,
extent. And he'll work on it. Of course, Vlahovic is still young. I mean, we can't forget that. But I think that's where Castrovilli, as you said, misses Ribery because Ribery, for his age and for his, let's say, shape which he is in current days, like of late, not, of course, not in his prime, and we can't expect him to be, was very much involved in Fiorentina's play in general, be it under Iachini, be it under Della. So yeah, I think I pretty much agree on that. I think, and I hope Castrovilli at some point regains his form, because he was linked to big teams man immediately, and I think that
yeah.
was a bit too soon. But I really like those initial sparks I saw from him. As you said, reminds me of somewhat of Pellegrini, and Pellegrini himself is doing such a fantastic job at Roma right now. So yeah, that's for Castrovilli, guys. And moving on, Costo, before we get into the predicted lineups and score, this is one thing I ask almost any guest I get on. Uh, give me your top six for the Serie A season, the current Serie A season, and also the bottom three in order.
I
I know,
think
I know it's hard, but
the trickiest one is probably the top of the league thing. I
mm,
mean, you can't really say this time, but
yeah, I know.
I'll probably go with Inter once again.
Mm,
Probably because, as I said before, that their focus has now changed,
yeah.
where basically they've got players who've won the league,
Mm,
whereas Juventus have been in transition for 3 years, 4 years
yeah,
now, whatever
yeah.
that's been, and they've even though they've still got players who did win the league,
Mm,
I think Al- Allegri has not yet found his
mm,
reliable core of
reliable.
players. I mean, in the previous spell that he had, you could see that he had this really reliable core
Yeah, of
who he
course.
could rely on pretty much every game.
Exactly.
In this spell, you still can't see it, and he has been changing formations, and which I'm a big fan of. I mean,
Mm,
Allegri was known for changing formations every 2 or 3 games,
mm,
but where your squad is already pretty much unsettled
yeah.
because of the last 2 seasons, hiring long-term managers and sacking them in the short term anyway, that whole bad habit. It's been a messed up squad, and you're constantly changing formations. That will never help you out. So I
Mm,
think I'll say Inter to win the league, and then I expect Milan to be second again because they've kept. I mean, I won't say they've kept hold of their most important players, but the way they've replaced those players,
a-
I
and
quite like
added
it. They fixed
and
the right issues.
and added to the squad as well. I mean,
Yeah,
the backups they missed last season. I think they are going to be right up there, and like I definitely agree with you on that. Yes, I continue. But just wanted to add.
yeah. I think Milan second.
Hmm.
I want to say Juve third, but you don't know about them right now.
Yeah,
But
I
I'll
agree. Yeah.
still say third because they're there, and it's either them or Napoli for third
Wow,
or
wow.
or fourth.
Hmm.
I mean, because I think I really like what Napoli are doing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in a lot of ways because a lot of Serie A teams at this point they constantly complain about the fact that they don't have attacking players. They've got specific players who can play
Hmm.
specific roles in
Hmm.
the attacking parts, whereas
Hmm.
Napoli they've got about 4 players
Hmm.
for every attacking role,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is weird.
Quite dynamic.
And
Yeah,
which, if nothing else, Elmas can play on the
yeah,
left, on the right.
yeah.
10 Mertens hasn't been
Hmm.
playing these days, but he can still play
Can
pretty
quarter,
much
of
everywhere in the
course.
front four.
Of course. I mean, you even have Petania just coming off the bench.
Yeah, the
Just
the
before,
Italian
yeah,
Ashley Barnes.
yeah. Just before he was about to sign for Sampdoria, comes on, scores versus Genoa,
Yeah,
and then of course De Laurentiis being De Laurentiis blocks the move. And doesn't answer apparently Ferrero's calls. Part of Serie A. That's calcio for you.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, as you said, Napoli, they're up right now as we record this. they're 2-0 up against Udinese, top of the table as things stand, and they'll probably end there as well. Quite love what they're doing, and I think Spalletti has probably got a very good squad, given the fact that they couldn't even spend anything. Almost they got Juan Jesus, and I think getting Zambo Anguissa was fantastic to cope up for Bakayoko's loss. So yeah, sorry, Kaustubh, just to keep you holding, that was your top four, I guess. Inter, Milan,
Yeah.
AC Milan, Juventus, Napoli in any order, and give me your fifth and sixth and the bottom three, please.
I think after the title thing, I think that's the most tricky because I want to
Yeah.
say Fiorentina,
You
but
you can, man.
I think it's probably a step too far. There'll probably
Okay.
be about
Hmm.
2 or 3 because I think where Fiorentina sort of they essentially fall behind Roma or Lazio is that they don't really have a proper right winger. I mean, I'm not saying we should sign Berardi or Orsolini
Hmm.
because these players are still, I think, a little bit expensive.
Yeah.
And I think Gonzalez can play on the right,
Hmm.
but I still think his best position is the left wing, and we've
Hmm.
got Callejon, who's actually doing a decent job.
Decent job.
But I still think to change the dynamic of how they play, they still need a proper right winger in Berardi or Orsolini. So I think that thing might just keep them behind Roma and Lazio. I think Roma will give a strong shot for top four. I think,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
because as we've seen with Mourinho's recent experiences, they'll probably just miss out
Hmm.
on top four by some points, and then
Hmm.
obviously Lazio. I mean, I'm very excited about Lazio, but
Yeah, we
um,
saw what happened with Cagliari.
yeah,
We
but it's a bit weird with him. Like, I don't think Acerbi has been great.
hmm.
I mean, I know he plays in a back four for
Hmm.
Italy, but on paper it's a back three.
Back three.
I mean, it's because Italy have got a dynamic shape. They
Hmm.
constantly change those shapes, and
Yeah.
in Italy's shape, you didn't have to play a higher defensive line. Whereas under Sarri, you've got to
Hari.
play a very
Oh,
high defensive line,
definitely.
and I think it probably just comes down to that. I like Luis Felipe, but again, the same problem.
Yeah.
You can't really rely on them yet for
Hmm.
high defensive line. So I do
Hmm.
expect Lazio to
Hmm.
concede more goals than we sort of expect. So yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's probably my top six.
Hmm. And who do you think will get relegated?
I think Venezia. I
Sad
think
one, man. I don't. I know. I really don't want them to, but I have a feeling they will.
because yeah, I mean they're a proper vibe club anyway.
Yeah,
They've got
exactly,
a great jersey. They've got
Great color.
multinational players from across
Yes,
the world, a great
love
city
that.
and stuff.
Yeah, love it.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I think
great stadium to mention where they finally
yeah,
made their
great
debut.
stadium. There's so much to like about them, but
But sad.
they'll probably finish last.
Yeah.
And then I still think Hellas Verona will go down, even
Wow.
though
Hmm.
Di Francesco's gone and they obviously got a result yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think when Ivan Juric was there, a bit
Yeah.
like
That.
Italiano at Spezia, they
Hmm.
operated on a shoestring budget and they overperformed for 2 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though I think if there's anything which can keep them in Serie A, it's probably that spine.
Hmm.
Illich being there,
Exactly.
Veloso being there,
Barak being there
yeah,
as well.
Barak being there. So they've still got a spine there, and they've
Hmm.
got the great Nikola Kalinic there as well. So I think the only thing which can probably keep them there is that spine, and I
Hmm.
think Salernitana are destined for relegation as well. I don't
Yeah.
really see.
Yeah.
I
It's
think there's a chance they finish below Venezia. I
Yeah.
mean,
I have a feeling. Yeah. I think if you ask me honestly, last season, I managed to catch a lot of Serie A B, and especially the three clubs that have been promoted this year, all of them have caught my eye because Empoli by far are the best team. Like they
yes,
have that ingrained in them, and they've been doing this for years. Kept that core. Uh, you know, they had Andrea Zoli before too, and their players
yeah,
went on to better teams as well. Of course, Milan took Krunic and whatnot, and they just had that always have that continuity about themselves. Like I know Dionisi sort of was a different
Yeah.
coach back in the last season, but then just to stay up, they brought back Andrea Azzoli, and I think they'll stay back. But
I
that's the
think
thing, yeah,
I think when we talk about Benacer, Krunic,
yeah,
and all these players, I think Samuel Ricci is probably going
yeah,
to be that player who
they'll be that player.
goes to a bigger club, and then we sort
Mhm.
of realize that he was the one who another Empoli player who went
Yeah,
on to do bigger things.
yeah, and it's just generally, they were so good last season in the Serie A. But you can see, even was you might have seen they lost 3-0 to Sampdoria this game week, but they didn't play that badly. They always
Yeah,
have this. They always come off as this team that
yeah,
always somewhat plays well, but might not get the result. And they showed it versus Juve that they can,
yeah,
but versus Sampdoria they couldn't. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with your bottom three. It hurts me to actually put Salernitana and Venezia there because you always want these new teams to stay there for a bit because it's always annoying to see, Frosinone come back, or let's say,
mhm,
it reminds me sort of Norwich City from the Premier League somewhat, kind of gets annoying for me personally at least. So I guess that was your top six and bottom three. And
yeah,
just to touch upon Lazio, just since you mentioned that you feel they're not you're gonna be there in top four, I agree because Sari, given the high line he plays, it's also going to lead out to sort of a burnout, I feel, before over the long course, because these players still need to adapt to that. I feel, Pedro, I know he's not, he's probably going to start, and I don't think he can probably keep up for an entire season. And this, I don't know if I may be wrong, but this Lazio side, if they continue with this approach, it reminds me of Sampaoli Sevilla to an extent. I don't know why.
yeah,
Sort
mhm,
of, not exactly, but the burnout they had as well. So yeah, I mean, that was an interesting top six and bottom three. Thanks for that. So moving to the last stages, Kaustubh, how do you think Fiorentina line up tomorrow? Can you please enlighten us on the formation and the predicted 11?
I think it's going to be a 4-3-3.
4-3.
So that's going to happen. I think I think the key thing is probably going to be the Saponara thing that you talked about. Because even though Gonzalez is a doubt, I think it's the sort of game where you should risk a player of that type.
Yeah.
And I don't really see I don't basically see the point of playing Saponara in that game, especially even though he scored in the previous game, due respect to that. Um, and as I'm saying that I've probably jinxed it, and he probably scores a goal and starts and scores against Inter and stuff. But I'll still go with Nicolas Gonzalez. Milinkovic comes back. And what's the other change that we're talking about? Because I think Kalehan Vlahovic will play. And I said Gonzalez starts. Pulga, Bonaventura. I think I'll probably go with, in this game, I'll probably start Torreira not as a defensive midfielder, but I mean, not in Pulga's place, but as that left-sided central midfielder.
Yeah.
Because it's the sort of game against Inter where historically, I mean, the last 3 seasons post Conte, Inter win a lot of their games in midfield, and they win or lose games in midfield. I mean, I always go back to their game against Lazio in the 1920 season where Lazio essentially clogged the midfield with Lucas, Luis Alberto, and Milinkovic Savic, and won the game on the break. I mean, Fiorentina won't really do that because they don't play that sort of a transition-based football. And ironically, it was Inzaghi who beat Inter with Lazio with that approach.
Yeah.
But Torreira is the sort of player who I trust on a technical level and on the physical aspect as well. So I think it is a bit unorthodox, but it's something that I would like to see at some point. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and the rest of it is probably the same as the previous
Yeah.
as the previous game.
So to get you correct, I'll just run through your lineup quickly. Of course, Dragowski in goal, there's no doubt about that. Odriozola at right back. Milenkovic, as you said, comes back in, allowed to partner with Lucas Martinez Quarta. And Cristiano Biraghi at left back. And you still think the midfield would be Bonaventura, or do you think Bonaventura gets benched?
I think Bonaventura plays.
Plays.
He has to play.
Yeah, Bonaventura, Torreira, and you think Duncan goes out and Pulgar comes in.
Yeah.
Yep. And the front three, of course, Vlahovic up front, there's no doubt. And the doubt remains Saponara or Nico Gonzalez on the left. And on right, of course, it has to be Kaya Horn. Of course, due to lack of options to an extent. So that's Fiorentina, and of course, Inter. On my end, it's not really going to be that different. Samir Handanovic in goal, Skriniar, De Vrij, Bastoni, the same backline, solid backline. You can't really start anyone else. Left wing back, I think Perisic will come back in this one. I don't think Di Marco will start because I think Perisic might not be the best in terms of going forward, but I think his defensive awareness and the amount of ground he covers is very vital against someone like Odriozola. And I think that's where Di Marco, if he starts, could struggle. And I think that's why I would still start with Perisic. Maybe Interisti listening to this would be like, what the hell are you saying right now? But in my opinion, it has to be Perisic. I think Hakan will come back in the left side of midfield. I think Vecino gets benched because even when Vecino started last game, Vecino is always this kind of player going forward, making those direct runs. He's so good, but just leaves so much space behind him, and in his own half, he's so uncomfortable. So I don't really want that versus Fiorentina. You can get away with this against teams like Bologna, Genoa, but not against Fiorentina. So Hakan comes back in.
He's the Uruguayan Frank Lampard in a way where he just gets at the end of random crosses.
Yeah. It's so unexpected, and he's, of course, he scored such vital goals for us over the season. So I think Hakan comes back in, Brozovic in the middle. Of course, you can't really, Pepe Bergomi and literally Inzaghi, as per reports, keep saying that this guy is the most, not the most, I mean, he's the most irreplaceable player right now at Inter, and I agree, because his role is so unique and the calm he maintains on the ball to win those large tackles, I really hope they extend his contract as soon as possible before January. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess. Barella, of course, keeps his position alongside on the right, and I think Dumfries will start this one. Even the reports say so. I think, he have to, because I think you can capitalize on Beragi in that case. And while I love Darmian, Darmian is so good. He's so handy. But I think Darmian is always that squad player that will give you something off the bench, and he will accept that role. He'll never have a problem, and he's never a problem creator. I know he didn't really get along at Man United, but you must know about his time there pretty well. So that's that. And the up top, I mean, it's going to be Lautaro and Dzeko because, of course, Korea is not traveling with the team. Alexis, thankfully, is back. Played a cameo versus Bologna, got an assist. That's a positive for us. Cetriano is an option. I mean, I was surprised that he wasn't even given a few minutes versus Bologna. Because watching him for the Primavera last season, I see that Lautaro has spark in him. I just do believe that he deserves a few minutes, and he definitely has to be loaned in January. Inzaghi kept him because he thought maybe, he could probably use him, but I really don't think that's going to happen. So hopefully a loan spell for him. So that's pretty much for Inter. So Kostobia, we are pretty much done with the predicted lineup. So let's come to the main, not the main part, but the most interesting part. Let's say score predictions. Kostobh, starting with you. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
I think 3-2 to Inter.
Okay.
And I say 3-2. That's probably because Fiorentina will probably create at least try to create a lot of chances, maybe get a penalty in there. But at the other end, they're still somewhat just relying on fate in a way. And I think with Lautaro in quite a good form, scoring in 3 games in a row now. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the sort of game which Fiorentina might just win maybe next season or the season afterwards. But at this point, I think they should not be disappointed with the 3-2 and being that high scoring game where I mean, at least let's just score from open goals and not just score penalties and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Convert the chances.
Yeah, and your prediction, as I think, alludes to what I said before. This fixture is always what defines Inter. The word pazza, as they say, crazy. This fixture in general is crazy, not just about Inter. It always has that something, Fiorentina, Inter. No matter how good the teams are or who the coach is. So along those lines, it's hard for me to make a prediction. I'll go ahead with one, but also to say, my biggest worry so far this season has been the fact that we've not kept a clean sheet. I know versus Bologna, Kolarov went to sleep and Thiat headed it in and whatnot, but Sorry, versus Genoa we did, my bad. But versus Hellas Verona and Sampdoria, a lot of things were avoidable. Like a lot. I feel that under the fact that Inzaghi allows his players to have a bit more freedom than Conte did,
Yeah.
is sort of something we are still adapting to in terms of Conte always saying that it's always about having the right balance when he was there. And people used to slate him for that, but he was right. It is about in the end having the right balance. And you watching Fiorentina this season, of course, probably
Yeah.
might ask for that too. So that's my worry going into this game as well. Like I really feel we need a clean sheet, and I know it's probably not going to happen versus you guys because, of course,
Yeah.
and another worry remains. He's a club legend and whatnot, but Samir Handanovic, man, like, uh he just he might just stay rooted to the spot if you take a shot from outside the box. He gets confused when to come off his line, when to not come off his line. I think if you notice that in the Sampdoria game when Sampdoria scored the equalizer versus us, the first goal, it's just an anomaly.
Yeah.
Handanovic at this point because he, so it's a hard one. I think just to be a bit biased, like just to have because I am an Inter fan, I'd say a 2-1 win. I'd say not as big a scoreline as yours, given that I've seen it's a crazy game, but I feel there would be a lot of high intense moments in the game leading to
Yeah.
this scoreline. Like that's my perception of it at least. So yeah, I mean let's hope at least it'll be a good game and it'll not a drab 0-0 like we are here predicting 5 goals, 3 goals.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean
That's
definitely
not
not.
gonna happen.
And yeah, because yeah, I mean and this just to cap off this game early on in the season, in my opinion, is going to be a good test for both the teams because
Yeah.
Fiorentina, as I said, are at this stage in the season, or let's say in terms of their rebuild, where in they finally have to start testing themselves versus the big teams. Yes, you guys lost versus Roma, but honestly, you guys played really well versus Roma, in my opinion,
Yeah.
barring the gaping holes and defensive errors. I mean, I feel you guys probably deserve the draw at least. I mean, you know, so and then of course, us leaving certain gaping holes and whatnot. And for Inter post Conte, you need to, still test yourself versus the big teams. And I personally consider Fiorentina as one of the big teams. They were, or I don't know if some people still consider them as one of the Seven Sisters. I mean, but they have been there for quite some time, right? So
One of the OGs,
OGs
the
is the
2000s.
yeah, exactly, OGs of the Seven Sisters. So you know, I think this sort of rejuvenated Fiorentina. I definitely want to test ourselves versus them. Like I'm really looking forward to the match tomorrow, and let's hope for a good game. So yeah, Kostub, just the final moments. I'll leave the floor to you. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything coming up for you? Just anything.
No, nothing really to plug because I mean, I just keep writing and writing on. That's pretty much what it is. I keep whatever I write, I just keep sharing. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at cos_pande17.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be leaving the links below. Don't worry about that. So yeah, guys, that was it for our Fiorentina versus Inter preview. Kostov, thanks for coming on. It was, it's always nice to have you. Get your insight on things. One of our favorite guests, of course. Like it's always good to have a chat with you regarding Serie A. Because we always tend to get into the nitty gritties of things, discuss various teams, and let's hope that if once I figure things out, we'll plan that Serie A segment which we have been working on. Guys, is that's something me and Kostov have been planning, and we'll try to start it as soon as possible. Whenever we probably don't have UCL or any European fixtures, so do keep an eye on our channel for that. Kostov will try to join us as often as possible whenever he can, of course. And yeah, as Kostov said, guys, check out his Twitter handle. I'll leave the link in the description below. And he again, just a reminder, writes for Footballitalia and get Italian football news. Follow them as well. That's probably the best account for covering calcio in general. So do keep an out, guys. And yeah, that's it for our episode. Thank you for joining us, and please leave a like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon to always get updates. Sempre Forza Inter as always.